Proteins, carbohydrates, and fats have the ability to be converted into acetyl-CoA. Now, our ability to convert these proteins, carbohydrates into acetyl-CoA allows us at that point to make a lot of different products that our body requires. One of these products is cholesterol. So we actually make cholesterol internally, and it's from this acetyl-CoA molecule that we make from proteins, carbohydrates, and fats. Now, to convert acetyl-CoA into cholesterol, it has to go through many steps inside the body for us to actually make cholesterol from acetyl-CoA. Now, one of the steps along the way to making cholesterol is a step that we actually use to synthesize our own CoQ10, which is well up the pathway to making cholesterol. Now, we make these isoprenoids along this pathway, and it's these isoprenoids that are used to make our CoQ10. Now, coenzyme Q10, the 10 here refers to these isoprenoids. And so this is what an isoprenoid or an isoprene looks like. It is a 4-carbon chain with 1 carbon attached to one of the center carbons. Now, it's called 10 because we have 10 of these isoprenoids attached to each other in a string of 10 units. So that's where we get the 10 from for coenzyme Q10. Now, if you're taking statins to lower your cholesterol, you're actually lowering your body's ability to synthesize its own cholesterol. And the drug acts on one of the steps way at the beginning of this whole pathway that also prevents us from making these isoprenoids. So if you are on a statin and you might want to look into taking a CoQ10 supplement, you might want to talk to your doctor about taking, again, a CoQ10 supplement because you are also interfering with your body's ability to make these isoprenoids that help us synthesize CoQ10. Now, we use the CoQ10 version of this antioxidant, but other animals and other organisms can use a CoQ10-6 or a CoQ10-8. And that means that they have a different number of these isoprenoid chains attached to this antioxidant. So when we eat food from an organism that has a CoQ6 or a CoQ8, we can actually convert it into our CoQ10 by adding extra isoprenoids to it. So we actually get the CoQ10 that we require for our bodies to work correctly. So again, if we're eating animals or organisms that make a CoQ10-6 or a CoQ10-8, we can convert that into our CoQ10 variation of this antioxidant. So if you again are taking a statin, it might interfere with your ability to modify our dietary CoQ6s and CoQ8s into our CoQ10. Okay, so again, these are the isoprenoids that make up our CoQ10, and this is essentially what I would call a tail to the antioxidant. And it's represented by the letter R here, and this is the head of the CoQ10 body, and this would be the R, so this would be where these 10 isoprenoid chains are attached to the CoQ10 molecule. So as you can see here, I have these 3 structures that represent CoQ10 because CoQ10 can exist in 3 different oxidative states. So the difference between oxidized and reduced is the fact that if this molecule is oxidized, that means it has no additional electrons. And electrons here are represented by the hydrogen atoms. So we have a quinone version of CoQ10 at the top here that is completely oxidized because it does not have the addition of any electrons that are available to bind to it. So this quinone CoQ10 version is completely oxidized. It has no additional electrons associated to it. Now in this here, this second structure here is a semiquinone, so it's partially reduced. And by being partially reduced, it's been attached by one electron. So this has the ability to attach 2 electrons here as a hydroquinone, and that would be completely reduced. So again, this is completely oxidized. It has no additional electrons attached to it. Partially reduced, meaning it has 1 electron attached to it, and then completely reduced, meaning it has 2 electrons bound to it. Now, the version of CoQ10 that has 2 electrons bound to it, that is completely reduced, is called Ubiquinol. So anyone over the age of 30, it is speculated that anyone over the age of 30 has a harder time absorbing the oxidized version of CoQ10, and in some doctors would recommend that you take a Ubiquinol version of CoQ10 for better absorption. So these are the 3 varying states that CoQ10 exists in, and it's the fact that it can exist without electrons, with 1 additional electron, or with 2 additional electrons that really give it its function for us in the body. So CoQ10 in the body is found in the mitochondria. Now, one of the functions of the mitochondria is to produce ATP for us, which is energy. So we produce most of our energy in these mitochondria. Now, it's inside the mitochondria, again, where we find our CoQ10 because it helps us to make energy. So one of the main places that we make energy in the mitochondria is something called the inner mitochondrial membrane. The mitochondria has actually 2 membranes, an outer membrane and an inner membrane. And it's that inner mitochondrial membrane is where we produce most of our ATP. Now, the way that we produce most of our ATP in the mitochondria is by separating positive and negative charges from one another to create this electrical gradient. Now, it's this electrical gradient that is going to allow us down here to recycle our ATP from ADP in inorganic phosphate. And that this potential gradient here allows us then to recycle our ATP. Now, it is this process that generates the most ATP for us in the body. And this is where we're going to find, again, our CoQ10 in this inner mitochondrial membrane. So these structures here that I have on the board, 1 through 4, are these all multi-protein complexes. And they're massive proteins, and they're buried in this inner membrane. So the inner membrane's in green. So that's fat soluble. And all these protein structures are actually in this hydrophobic membrane. Now, this is probably, this I would imagine is hydrophobic, so it's going to allow the CoQ10 to insert itself in this hydrophobic membrane. But anyways, it's the ability of this CoQ10 to vary between these 3 different structures that help move these electrons down this membrane to help create that gradient that's needed for us to produce ATP. So here we have CoQ10 in complex 1, in complex 2, and in complex 3. So that's where we're going to find our CoQ10 in the body, is where we make the most ATP. Now, if you want to learn more about how CoQ10 moves electrons, changes states between completely reduced and completely oxidized to help move these electrons down this gradient, you can go and search Q cycle. And you can also search the electron transport chain online. So if you type in CoQ10 Q cycle, you will be able to see how CoQ10 really changes its electron state to help move electrons down this membrane. So this is how CoQ10 functions for us. It produces ATP for us. It's critical for helping us to produce the energy we need. So when you think of having signs of deficiency for CoQ10, you're gonna, if you step back, you'd think that wherever we need the most energy in our body is probably where we're going to be experiencing the symptoms of a deficiency for CoQ10, which would be the brain, the skeletal muscle, and the heart, because these three areas in the body require the most ATP. And that's where we express symptoms of a CoQ10 deficiency. So on the board here, I have just a list of some of the deficiency symptoms associated with a CoQ10 deficiency. So we have scoliosis, we have high blood pressure, we have seizures, encephalopathy, which is basically a brain disease or an altered brain function. We have slowed thinking, fatigue, abnormal walk, ataxia, which is the inability to control muscle movement. We have cardiomyopathy, which is a disease of the heart. And again, we have learning disabilities. So if you see these symptoms here, they're all associated with the three areas that I highlighted that require the most ATP. So this is CoQ10. We can make our own CoQ10 from protein, carbs, and fats to get this essential tail that the CoQ10 needs for us. And if you're over 30, you might want to start looking into supplementing with the Ubiquinol version if you're interested in supplementing with CoQ10 at all. If you are on a statin, you might want to talk to your doctor about taking a CoQ10 supplement in conjunction with this statin. Okay, so thanks for watching.